Picture this, November 1972. It's a quiet Tuesday evening across America. But this particular night isn't quiet at all. Dozens of television stations are deliberately refusing to broadcast an episode. Sponsors are panicking. CBS is drowning in thousands of protest letters. The media is in absolute chaos. And yet, 65 million people still tune in to see what the fuss is all about. What could possibly be so controversial that it shakes the entire nation? Not a political manifesto. Not a war documentary. But a 47-year-old woman on a sitcom deciding to have an abortion. The year was 1972. The Supreme Court hadn't even legalized abortion nationwide yet. That wouldn't happen for another 2 months. And somehow, a comedy show featuring a character named Ma became the epicenter of a cultural earthquake. But here's the thing that makes this story even more remarkable. The woman playing Ma was someone Hollywood had completely written off decades earlier. She was too tall. Her voice was too deep. She didn't look anything like the starlets they wanted on screen. The industry basically told her, "You don't have what it takes." Yet this rejected actress would go on to transform American television, not just once, but twice. And her journey to get there? It's one of the most inspiring stories of perseverance you'll ever hear. I'm diving deep into the extraordinary life of Bea Arthur. Let's go back to the beginning. May 13, 1922. Brooklyn, New York. A girl named Bernice Frankel was born into a Jewish family with roots in Poland and Austria. Her parents, Philip and Rebecca, were hard-working immigrants determined to build something better for their daughters. When Bernice was still young, the family made a bold move. They left the crowded streets of Brooklyn for a small town called Cambridge, Maryland. Here, they opened a women's clothing store and tried to build a quiet life in a community where they were among the very few Jewish families. But Bernice had other dreams. While other kids were playing outside, she was studying the movies. She'd watch Mae West command the screen with pure confidence. She'd study June Allison's smile. She'd practice their movements in secret, imagining herself up there on the silver screen. By age 12, she'd already developed a burning ambition that would define her entire life. There was just one problem: she didn't look like any of those stars. By her teenage years, Bernice had shot up to nearly 6 feet tall, unusually tall for a woman in the 1940s. In school plays, she wasn't cast as the romantic lead or the ingenue. She got the male roles, the parts for boys. That stung. While she desperately wanted to play the delicate female characters, the teachers kept putting her in men's parts. But something interesting happened. While her appearance made her feel like an outsider, her mind made her stand out. She had a razor-sharp wit. She could make people laugh with a single line. Her classmates voted her wittiest girl in school, and that title would matter more than she could have possibly known. At 16, Bernice was diagnosed with a blood clotting disorder. Her parents, worried about her health, enrolled her at Lehman Hall, a prestigious boarding school in Pennsylvania. Those years away from home forced her to grow up fast. She learned independence. She learned resilience. She learned that sometimes the obstacles in your path become the building blocks of your character. After high school, she attended Blackstone College for Girls in Virginia, but she was torn. Her heart wanted the performing arts. Her practical mind knew her parents expected stability. So when World War II started, Bernice made a decision that would shape who she'd become. In 1943, she enlisted in the United States Marine Corps Women's Reserve. She wasn't running away from her dreams, she was running towards something bigger than herself. She started as a typist in Washington, D.C., but then volunteered for something harder. She transferred to motor transport school at Camp Lejeune. After graduating, she drove trucks and coordinated transportation for the military. She earned the rank of staff sergeant and received an honorable discharge in 1945. When she came home, she still wasn't ready for entertainment. She enrolled at the Franklin School of Science and Arts in Philadelphia and became a medical laboratory technician. For a brief time, she worked in hospitals, running tests, saving lives in a different kind of way. But it wasn't enough. Something in her kept calling her back to the stage. In 1947, at the age of 25, Bernice Frankel made the leap. She moved to New York and enrolled at the dramatic workshop of the New School. She was starting over. For the third time, she joined off-Broadway theater companies. She became a fixture at the Cherry Lane Theater. Night after night, she performed in Shakespearean plays, Greek tragedies, and modern European dramas. She had small roles, always small roles, but she was on stage. She was doing what she loved. The problem was, nobody knew who she was. For more than a decade, Bea Arthur existed in the theater world as an insider secret. Across the country, nobody had heard her name. But in New York's theater community, people whispered about this tall woman with the striking angular face and that distinctive deep voice. She was impossible to ignore once you saw her perform. She didn't fit the mold of movie stars. At 5 feet 10 inches, she was taller than most of her male co-stars. Her voice wasn't delicate or breathy. It was deep, commanding, almost masculine. Her face wasn't soft or conventionally beautiful. It was sharp, expressive, powerful. While her contemporaries were being cast as romantic leads in Hollywood, Bea was stuck playing strong-willed women and characters older than her actual age. The industry had a very clear message: you're not the type. But something remarkable was happening. The very qualities that Hollywood rejected were becoming her superpowers on stage. During this time, she was also picking up television work as the medium exploded across America. Shows like Studio One, Kraft Television Theater, The 7 Lively Arts, and Caesar's Hour became her proving ground. Her roles were small, but each appearance was a lesson. Each performance taught her something new about connecting with an audience through a camera lens. In 1954, she landed one of the most important roles of her early career, Lucy Brown in the English-language production of The Three Penny Opera. It was still a supporting part, but it was a pivotal one. In that production, she met Lena Horne, and that experience shaped everything she'd do going forward. Years later, she'd credit Lena Horne, Lee Strasberg, and Sid Caesar as the 3 people who most influenced her acting style. Throughout the 1950s, she kept moving between the stage and television. A nightclub owner once pulled her aside and said something that would echo for the rest of her career. "Stop limiting yourself to drama. You're funny. You should do comedy." She filed that away. By 1964, after nearly 20 years of grinding it out, night after night, show after show, Bea Arthur finally caught the attention of critics. She was cast in the Broadway production of Fiddler on the Roof as Yent, the matchmaker. It was still a supporting role, but when the curtain fell, the audience knew exactly who she was. The deep voice, the razor-sharp delivery, the impeccable timing. Critics loved her. Audiences loved her. And suddenly, after 2 decades of obscurity, people started paying attention. The Tony Award came in 1966 for Mame, where she played Vera Charles opposite Angela Lansbury's title character. It wasn't the leading role, but it didn't matter. She was brilliant, and everyone knew it. That performance launched her into a different stratosphere. She wasn't an unknown stage actress anymore. She was a Tony Award-winning Broadway star. Throughout the 1960s, Bea was building momentum. She appeared in films like Lovers and Other Strangers. She continued performing on stage. She was becoming a name that meant something in the entertainment industry. Then, in the early 1970s, producer Norman Lear came knocking. Norman Lear had created a sitcom called All in the Family, and he saw something in Bea Arthur that nobody else could see. He wanted her to play Edith's cousin, a woman named Ma, whose political views clashed spectacularly with Archie Bunker's conservative worldview. Bea hesitated. Actually, she did more than hesitate. She turned him down. Multiple times. She didn't want to leave the stage. She didn't believe she was right for television comedy. She was worried about being trapped in a long-running series. But Lear kept pushing. He saw something in her, that distinctive voice, that commanding presence, that ability to make you believe every word she said, even when she was being ridiculous. Finally, she said yes to 2 episodes. 2 episodes. As a guest star. What happened next changed everything. Ma Finley became a sensation. The audience response was so overwhelming that CBS didn't waste time. Within months, they greenlit Maude as its own series. Ma went from a guest star to the lead of her own show. From 1972 to 1978, Maude ran for 6 seasons and 141 episodes. Anne B. Arthur did something that very few sitcoms had ever dared to do. She centered an entire series on a middle-aged woman. Not a supporting character. Not someone's mother. The main character. And this woman wasn't gentle or kind or traditionally feminine. She was hot-tempered, blunt, opinionated. She argued constantly. She had strong political beliefs and wasn't afraid to share them. She was, quite frankly, exhausting to be around, and audiences couldn't get enough. Maude tackled issues that sitcoms simply didn't touch. Vietnam War, Richard Nixon, divorce, menopause, alcoholism, mental health, women's rights, gay rights, domestic violence. These weren't punchlines, they were real human struggles, explored with both humor and genuine empathy. And then came November 1972. Maude's Dilemma aired in 2 parts. In the episode, Ma discovers she's pregnant at 47 years old. After real soul-searching, she decides to have an abortion. The nation lost its mind. Dozens of local TV stations refused to air it. Sponsors panicked. CBS received thousands of letters calling for the episode to be pulled. Newspapers from coast to coast debated whether a sitcom had the right to explore such a serious, controversial topic. But approximately 65 million people watched anyway. They wanted to see what everyone was talking about. They wanted to know what made this show so dangerous. The episode aired again in reruns. More stations picked it up. By summer, even the stations that initially refused to broadcast it had changed their minds. Public opinion shifted. People understood that Maude wasn't trying to push an agenda, it was trying to tell an honest story about a complicated human experience. Looking back now, historians recognize Maude's Dilemma as one of the most significant turning points in American television history. It proved that a sitcom could matter, that a comedy could tackle serious subjects, that entertainment and social responsibility weren't mutually exclusive. And at the center of it all was Bea Arthur, the woman Hollywood once said would never be a star. Maude was wildly successful. It won Emmy Awards. It won Golden Globes. Bea won an Emmy in 1977 for Outstanding Lead Actress. The show was making money. Networks wanted to keep it on the air forever. But in 1978, Bea made a decision that shocked the industry. She walked away. Not because the show had jumped the shark. Not because ratings were falling. Not because she was tired of the character. She walked away because she believed the story had reached its natural ending. She didn't want to milk the character for ratings. She didn't want to keep playing Ma just because it was profitable. She wanted to leave while the show was still great. This decision revealed something fundamental about who Bea Arthur was as an artist and as a person. She wasn't chasing fame. She wasn't desperate to stay relevant. She had integrity. She understood that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is know when to stop. The years that followed were quieter. She appeared on TV specials. She did the Star Wars Holiday Special in 1978. Yes, really. The Beatrice Arthur Special in 1980 featuring Rock Hudson and Melba Moore. A sitcom called Amanda's in 1983 based on the British show Fawlty Towers, which got cancelled after just 10 episodes aired. For the first time in years, Bea experienced failure. A project that didn't work. A show that got pulled off the air before finding its audience. It was a humbling period. After the massive success of Maude, could she ever capture that magic again? Would there be another great role? Or was Maude the pinnacle and everything else would be a disappointment? In 1985, screenwriter Susan Harris sat down to create a new sitcom. She had a very specific actress in mind. Susan Harris deliberately wrote the character of Dorothy Zbornak specifically for Bea Arthur. She designed Dorothy around everything that made Bea special: the tall stature, the deep voice, the sharp wit, the commanding presence. When Bea read the script, she said yes immediately. The show she was joining would feature 4 women: Bea Arthur as Dorothy, Betty White as Rose, Rue McClanahan as Blanche, and Estelle Getty as Sophia. For women, no men as leads. No romantic entanglements with male characters driving the plot. Just 4 women, their friendships, their lives, their stories. From the first episode, The Golden Girls, was lightning in a bottle. For 7 seasons and 180 episodes, the show dominated television. It ranked in the top 10 most watched programs in America for 6 of those 7 years. Reruns became a cultural phenomenon. The show fundamentally changed how television portrayed older women. Before The Golden Girls, older women on TV were either sweet, grandmotherly figures or comic relief. They weren't the center of the story. They weren't dating. They weren't having adventures. They weren't the stars of their own lives. Dorothy, Rose, Blanche, and Sophia shattered that. They were complex. They were sexual. They were funny. They were tragic. They were real. Anne B. Arthur's Dorothy was the emotional anchor of the show. But here's what's fascinating. Dorothy and Ma Finley were completely different characters. Ma was loud, argumentative, immediate in her emotions. Dorothy was composed. She used silence as a weapon. She'd deliver a devastating one-liner with an almost expressionless face, and you'd be destroyed by it. Dorothy's comedy came from restraint, from timing, from the ability to say more with a pause than most actors could say with a monologue. That deadpan style, that became B. Arthur's signature. It became one of the most difficult and most respected styles of comedy in television history. Generations of comedians would study her technique, trying to master that subtle, almost invisible art form. B won another Emmy in 1988, this time for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Comedy Series. All 4 main cast members eventually won Emmys. It was extraordinarily rare for an ensemble cast where every single lead actress took home television's highest honor. Behind the scenes, the relationships were complicated and real. Rue McClanahan and B had already worked together on Maude, so their chemistry was instant. B had a deep friendship with Angela Lansbury that went all the way back to MAME. She respected Estelle Getty deeply, even though Estelle played her mother on screen despite being only slightly younger in real life. Her relationship with Betty White was more complicated. They had very different personalities and working styles. They were never as close as B was with Rue. But they were professionals. They treated each other with respect. And together, they created something magical. In 1992, when The Golden Girls was still pulling strong ratings, B made the same choice she'd made with Maude. She walked away. This time, the remaining 3 women stayed and did a spin-off called The Golden Palace. It lasted 1 season. The audience knew. The show needed all 4 of them. You can't replace that magic. B appeared only in the premiere episode as a guest, and that was that. Here's what's crucial to understand about B. Arthur. She was not the woman you saw on screen. In public, she was guarded about her personal life. She almost never gave interviews about romance, marriage, or family drama. She didn't court tabloid attention. She didn't want her private life dissected in newspapers. Her life before fame was shaped by 2 marriages and 1 defining choice. In 1944, while serving in the Marines, she married Robert Allen Arthur, a serviceman who'd later become a television writer and producer. The marriage lasted about 3 years. They divorced without drama. They had no children. And when she kept his last name, changing the spelling slightly from Arthur to Arthur, it wasn't some grand artistic statement. It was just the name that stuck. That name would end up on Broadway posters, on Emmy Awards, in the credits of 2 revolutionary television shows. In 1950, she married Gene Saxes, a young actor she met at the dramatic workshop. They were partners in every sense of the word. While B performed, Gene transitioned into directing and became one of Broadway's most respected directors. When Gene directed MAME in 1966, B performed in it and won a Tony. They were at the peak of their powers at the same moment. But as BA's fame exploded, especially after Maude made her a household name, the gap between them widened. B went from being a respected stage actress to being recognized by 65 million television viewers every week. Gene remained devoted to theater, making fewer public appearances. Their lives diverged. There's no evidence of scandals or bitter conflicts. But their increasingly different paths, their demanding careers, and the pressure of BA's fame gradually pushed them apart. In 1978, they divorced quietly. No legal battles. No tabloid headlines. No hostile interviews. They simply ended their marriage and moved on with mutual respect. Bea never married again. Instead, she devoted herself to her 2 adopted sons, Matthew and Daniel. She kept them away from the spotlight. When she came home from filming, she shed the persona of the television star. She became a mother who cooked, read, tended her garden, cared for her dogs, and spent quiet evenings with her family. Friends recalled that she preferred staying home to attending Hollywood parties. Adrienne Barbeau remembered that all Bea wanted to do after work was go home, be with her family, her dog, and her kitchen. That simple life, that was her paradise. In her final years, when asked if she had any regrets, Bea didn't talk about the roles she didn't get or the awards she didn't win. The first thing she mentioned was her children. "I wish I had spent more time with my children." It was one of the few times she spoke openly about personal pain. She understood that some moments, your child's birthday, a quiet afternoon together, the everyday rituals of family life, they can never be reclaimed. No amount of professional success can bring them back. That realization changed how she lived her final decades. As the 21st century began, Bea deliberately scaled back her work. She wasn't looking for long-running television contracts anymore. She didn't need to prove herself. She appeared on Malcolm in the Middle. She voiced a character in Futurama. She played Larry David's mother on Curb Your Enthusiasm. She even showed up on the Comedy Central roast of Pamela Anderson in 2005, delivering risque jokes in her trademark deadpan style and shocking everyone. But she only took roles she genuinely loved. She alternated them with one-woman stage shows where she toured across America, the UK, Australia, and South Africa, continuing to perform on stage into her 80s. What most people didn't know was that during these years, Bea was quietly battling lung cancer. She'd been a smoker for most of her life, and the disease was spreading. But she kept it private. She didn't tell the press. She didn't tell most of her colleagues. She just underwent treatment while continuing to work when she could. On April 25, 2009, at the age of 86, Bea Arthur passed away at her home in Los Angeles. The tributes poured in immediately. Angela Lansbury, who'd been her friend since MAME in 1966, called her the closest friend I've ever had. Rue McClanahan and Betty White shared how much her absence would hurt. Broadway theaters dimmed their marquee lights for 1 minute in her honor. But here's what says the most about who Bea really was. In her will, she left $300,000 to the Ali Forney Center, an organization supporting homeless LGBTQ+ youth. She'd been raising money for them in her final years, despite her declining health. She believed those young people deserved protection, care, and a place to call home. In 2017, 8 years after her death, the Ali Forney Center opened the Bea Arthur Residence, a housing facility for homeless LGBTQ+ youth who had nowhere else to go. It wasn't a monument to her fame. It wasn't an award bearing her name. It was a home. A real place where real people got a second chance at life. That's her real legacy. Bea Arthur didn't revolutionize television through glamour or conventional beauty. She did it by proving that television could be better, smarter, braver, and more human. Before Maude and The Golden Girls, middle-aged women were supporting characters in their own lives. They appeared as mothers or comic relief. They weren't the center of the story. They didn't drive the narrative. Bea proved they could. She proved that a woman in her 40s and 50s could be the heart and soul of an entire television series. She proved that audiences didn't need romantic subplots or glamorous leading men to stay invested. They just needed real characters doing real things. Maude opened the door for sitcoms to tackle social issues seriously. Abortion, divorce, mental health, domestic violence. These became part of the language of television drama and comedy. The show didn't preach. It didn't lecture. It simply told stories about complicated human experiences. That approach paved the way for every socially conscious television show that came after. And then there's her acting style, that deadpan, restrained approach to comedy. She almost never used exaggerated facial expressions. No physical gags. No mugging for the camera. Just an expressionless face, a deep voice, and perfect timing. Every line landed exactly where it needed to land. That style is incredibly difficult to master. But generations of comedians have studied it. They've tried to replicate it. They've built their careers on that foundation. Her influence on how female characters were written can't be overstated. The image of an older woman who is independent, intelligent, witty, and unafraid to express her opinions, that became more common in television because of Bea Arthur. Writers, producers, and actors discussing strong female characters still find it impossible to overlook her impact. And then there's the charitable work. The housing for homeless LGBTQ+ youth. The message that those young people deserved care and protection and a home, not rejection. Bea Arthur's path was never smooth. There were decades waiting in the wings of Broadway. Moments when she had to choose between work and family. Feelings she carried her whole life. Regrets she only admitted near the end. But what runs through her entire story is this: she always moved forward on her own terms. She never tried to become the movie star Hollywood wanted. She never changed herself to fit the industry's molds. She was tall when the industry wanted petite. She had a deep voice when they wanted breathy whispers. She was opinionated when they wanted demure. And instead of fighting against those qualities, she leaned into them. She made them her signature. Today, Maude still shocks viewers with its boldness. A comedy series that was genuinely ahead of its time. Dorothy Zbornak continues to appear on television screens around the world with that deep voice, that expressionless face, and those perfect one-liners that make audiences laugh decades later. And in New York, the Bea Arthur Residence continues to open its doors to young people who have nowhere else to go. Each one preserves a different part of Bea Arthur. The artist, the woman, the human being who never stopped caring about those most vulnerable. That's why, many years after the stage lights faded, the name Bea Arthur is still spoken with such deep respect. Not just because of the roles that shaped American television history, but because she embodied something rarer, a woman who refused to allow age, appearance, or prejudice to define her limits. Every time Maude argues with Archie Bunker. Every time Dorothy delivers a devastating one-liner. Every time a young person finds shelter at the Bea Arthur Residence. That's Bea Arthur, still present, still fighting, still mattering. That's the remarkable life of a woman who proved that the greatest transformations don't happen because you fit the mold. They happen because you refuse to.